Hello, everyone. I'm Colin Morris, and I head up Nasstar's team that's focused on the legal market. I only joined Nasstar in January of this year, but in terms of my career, it spans 36 years entirely focused on legal IT. It began with 7 years as head of IT at Linklaters, and then the rest of my time has been spent as an independent consultant, advising law firms how best to implement effective IT strategies. In joining Nasstar, I guess I've become the proverbial poacher turned gamekeeper, or perhaps that should be the other way around. I'm not sure. But anyway, enough about me. I'm joined by Neil Clegg, one of our consulting directors. Neil, would you like to just give yourself a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Colin. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Clegg. I guess here at Nasstar, as Colin said, I head up the consulting area, and I've been predominantly working in the finance legal sectors for kind of over 13 years now, and the sort of career is sort of 20 years in the industry, and still managed to kind of have my hair. Yeah, but also working an awful lot in sort of heavily regulated and sort of the FCA kind of quagmires of the world, and I guess today's sort of challenge in the main, I try to find the questions to know with the answer to be met, with the question being, like, we want to be secure, we want to be agile, but finding the questions of how to get there is the kind of trick with modern IT. Everyone wants the end point, but it's the journey and the questions of how to get there.
Yeah, understand that. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, it's a challenge all the time.
Yeah, the challenges. Yeah. Well, today, look, guys, we're going to consider the subject of outsourced IT and look at what's driving more and more law firms to go down that path. We'll be looking at the subject from the point of view of the managing partner, and discuss how outsourced IT fits in with a firm's overall business strategy. Just before we begin, I'll just mention a few housekeeping points. First, by outsourced IT, what we're meaning is an entirely managed IT that's entirely managed by a third party, whether that's in-house IT or in the cloud or a hybrid of both. Second, we'll use generically the title of managing partner, but it applies equally to head of chambers, chief executive, essentially anyone who's responsible for the overall business strategy of a legal practice. And third, so that we can keep the session on track, if we could push questions to the end, we'll try and leave some time at the end of the session for questions. So any questions, if we can push those to the end. Okay, let's get started. Let's look at the role of the managing partner. You'll see here an orange peel, and it has a number of segments. And prior to joining Nasstar, I sat on the management board of several law firms, quite similar to the role of a non-exec would on a corporate. As such, over the years, I've worked closely with a great number of managing partners, helping them to create and deliver successful IT strategies. And what they consistently told me about their role in general, and about IT specifically, is this sort of many-faceted role of theirs, covering sort of, as you can see, things like HR. This isn't meant to be I'm sure managing partners are far busier than this slide indicates, but it's a number of disciplines which they're completely comfortable with. Premises, they understand that, they know what they've got to do, finance, HR, etc., etc. But there's this sort of missing black segment, and I wonder what that segment might be.
Well, yeah. What could it be?
What could it be?
Well, yeah, it is the missing segment, isn't it? And I sometimes wish it was missing all the time, and everything automatically happens, isn't it, Colin? But unfortunately, there's no Harry Potter wands that exist in the world to make it, and sort of change the constant in the industry, and finding that balance is really not easy. It's time consuming, and can often feel like consulting tribal elders under a full moon to try and divine what it all kind of means, and then there's sort of doom mongering in the marketplace saying the sky is going to fall in due to X and Y security issues, and which regrettably does happen in some of the world today. But yeah, it's a bit of a black hole sometimes. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, your reference to Harry Potter is right, actually, because it's often referred to as being a dark art that causes more
black hole.
Yeah, causes more angst to managing partners than anything else. I mean, the the issue it was actually summed up to me at the end of last year by one managing partner who said that it was IT that always caused him embarrassment at partners meetings, because he'd present the sort of business case and we're going to do X and it's going to cost Y, and then at the next board meeting everything would change and nobody could understand, not least the managing partner, why there was such significant change. Against that sort of backdrop, there's no denying that IT is, of course, a critical element of any legal practices business, and as such, the managing partner has a right to be able to manage it in the same way that he or she manages all the other disciplines that form the business. IT needs to be predictable, both from a functional, practical, and from a cost perspective. Later, we'll discuss why outsourced IT meets those criteria and alleviates the MP from the frustration of trying to manage something that, frankly, is pretty much unmanageable. It's all about putting control back into the managing partner's hands.
Yeah, and indeed, Colin, to echo, I was talking to a partner a while back, and sort of reminiscing, and sort of the dawn chorus, the secretary pulls, and mail rooms waking up, and somehow things just seemed to happen. And yes, they were, things were a lot of the time they were late. You didn't know you were going to get a response, and but it was a consistent theme, and I suppose more importantly, probably more apt actually, is that cost control is known. It's like, well, this is the mailroom, and this is the chorus of secretaries, and that's what it is, kind of thing. And every day, this is what happens, and you're sort of like, what's going on with it all, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a very common sentiment that we certainly see across the board.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just consider for a moment the sort of changing face of IT, and just delve a bit deeper and try and understand why it's IT is the most complex, most volatile, least understood aspect of the managing partner's role. I mean, fundamentally, if you look back 20, 25 years, we were communicating with clients via email, we were creating documents. What's changed? Why has it suddenly got so out of control? And the fact of the matter is that underneath the surface, it's just got that much more complicated. Just to give you, a few headings here, in terms of data, in 2010, so only, 11 years ago, there were 2 zettabytes of data on the planet. Don't ask me what a zettabyte is. Actually 2 to the power of 70. It's some ridiculous number, but that was the data on the planet. We don't need to get hooked on that. But the point is that by 2020, so 10 years, it had grown to 59, 59 zettabytes, so 30 times that. And that 30-fold growth is, absolutely not going to peter out anytime soon. It's going to carry on growing at that rate. And law practices are adept at creating data. They absolutely, are included in that growth rate.
Well, yeah, it's so interesting that point out data. I mean, I was reading a thing about on sort of YouTube, and every day you got all these kind of influencers, they're called, and they record their videos themselves, avoiding COVID restrictions, going to Dubai, showing off all these whatever kind of things. But I was talking to a firm the other day, and they're sort of saying, well, actually, we've got to record a lot of the content. So they record some of the meetings in order to be able to document it, write it up, and so on and so forth in the interview process. And you kind of think back, well, hey, back in the day, that was just that was on a telephone call and it's recorded and dictated to. But video is 10 to 20 times larger than the standard file. And so suddenly that data growth, and whilst you kind of think, oh yeah, YouTube, how does that affect me or anything like that, but the usage of video and rich kind of content material, it's data, it's storage, and it just grows and grows and grows, kind of thing, and you don't know what to get rid of, you don't know what to keep, and it's a real exponential problem across the board. We're seeing everywhere that kind of stuff, and people want HD content and et cetera, and but it's just, you got to deal with it though. You got to have it. You got to store
Absolutely.
it. You can't ignore it.
The thing is, regardless of all that data, that massive amount of data that we're now growing, if we look, in terms of performance, your busy lawyer doesn't care about all that. Regardless of the fact that we've got so much more data, IT has got to be in a state where it can deliver performance that is, consistent and acceptable. The lawyer doesn't care that he's, now navigating through, endless complexities of integration and volume of data to get to a point where, he just wants the answer. So, it's like everything in life, we want more for less, basically. Fact of life. Security, which, is undeniably an issue as far as law firms. The CIA actually have flagged law firms as being one of the top 3 targets for criminality, state-backed criminality that we all face today. I mean, this is more in your area than mine, Neil, but we absolutely have to have IT that is as robust as possible from a security perspective.
Well, that's right, and it's interesting. Kind of comment said there. I mean, we got sort of a generation of instant gratification and kind of dovetailing your sort of performance and security together is like, kind of like generation of Facebook and Apple, where their technology is incredible. Just click, make it so. And but behind this, these companies pour billions and billions into the make it so. And I'm not saying corporate IT can't keep up that demand, but the rocks of reality is what we found, that a balance has got to be found, and equally with that balance, you got the security side of it to do it, and the likes of sort of Facebook had their 500 million record data leak, data extraction leak, and they're almost trying to present it as like a norm, that data will be lost, and you kind of go, well, okay, well, Facebook's trying to make that spin that it's okay to lose data, but but for a law firm, you'd be like, that can't happen. They're almost trying to make it an acceptable thing, and the sort of generation today is like, they want performance, and they also, there's lots of data security concerns, because people are starting to take privacy very, very, very seriously. They have been for a long time, but now it's coming, really to the forefront of it, and it's a really serious problem at the moment. And like you say, it's fat cat targets, and I use that in, sort of very generically to say, stealing money from conveyancing and trying to convince people, trick people for bank account transfers, for housing, and so on and so forth. It's a very common tactic to try and deploy the man in the middle attacks kind of things. So it's a really serious, it's a very serious rise of problems on that one.
Yeah, and just we won't labour these points too heavily, but interaction between applications is a key item as well, of complexity in not just law firm IT, but all IT anywhere. But because the fact of the matter is, and actually to illustrate that, 25, we mentioned 25 years ago, when I was at Linklaters, we did an analysis of the number of times we were holding the client name and address, and we found it was held in 27 different places. And of course, today we all want one version of the truth. We don't want to manage 27 instances of the client name or whatever it might be. So for that to be the case, there is this sort of integration between applications, which at the top end it's seamless, you don't even think about it, but of course underneath it you've got IT supporting that integration, which again adds layer of complexity.
Oh yeah, of course. And I just to sort of echo that. I mean, I'm going to quite a firm a few years ago now, and they had 28 different TMS and DMS systems, kind of collectively from acquisitions, of course, and and you kind of go, okay, fine, you understand the journey where it comes from, is organic growth, and but ultimately the whole firm is almost operating in like a dysfunctional fashion, billing and financials taking forever and just riddled with constant kind of problems, and you kind of start looking underneath it, and you've almost created a whole cottage industry within the firm, try and make sense of it, try and kind of make it work, and it takes a force of nature, which is the managing partner, to try and turn like a battleship in a stormy sea. You got to turn it around, you got to make it integrate, because ultimately you need one version of the truth, and few partners are using a legacy probate system. Yes, on face value it looks sensible, but what's the hidden risks and the costs behind the curtain? It's not always obvious, and every time we start investigating these, you're like, this is just crazy. What are we doing here? Why are we allowing something so horrendous to kind of live on? But it's just kind of accepted sometimes, and this cottage industry evolves and takes on a will of its own and force of its own. You got to stop it.
And access, as well is a key point, because back in the day, we tended to access probably, well, certainly from a fixed location, the office, and we probably had a homogeneous device. The firm would have a particular device for accessing. These days we have multiple devices from multiple locations, and we expect access and performance and everything else to be seamless, identical. We can't have sort of boundaries or impact on or a location impacting what the end user sees. It has to be seamless access from everywhere.
Yeah, saying on that, I was talking to a firm the other day, and and like the SRA, Solicitors Regulation Authority, and FCA sort of Chapter 3, they're great guidebooks, obviously, for how you should conduct, if it's to do with like mortgaging, or as you said earlier, probate conveyancing, and how you should operate, and so on and so forth. But like some of the keywords, some of the terms they use in them are almost deliberately vague. There's terms such as need to use them safe, carefully and securely. And what does that mean? Does that mean you're wearing mittens in a locked room? The sort of access kind of thing needs to be used carefully and securely. And there's so much. I'm going to kind of call it kind of FUD that kind of resonates in this kind of space, and you've got to really sort of you do really need a trusted partner to try and go, well, actually, what are firms, what are they doing, and how do you actually want to work like this? Because everyone wants access these days. We're all sat here working from home, but what does it mean to your sort of your data, and how are you ensuring you're meeting client requirements or requirements of the SRA? Because it's like I say, it's very, very grey area, and I guess when you look at parallels with this into the financial services industry, if you're more specifically, if you're dealing with the likes of Visa, Mastercard, and in the sort of retail supply chain space kind of thing, you find that their contractual regulations are extremely tight and very well considered. And I kind of sort of challenge that they really, some of the UK things of like, oh, hey, here's cyber essentials and so on. It's great. It's a very good sort of, with all due respect to it, it's sort of semi-tick box exercise. But when we compare it to the likes of PCI, I'm not saying PCI is the best thing ever, but there are more robust frameworks out there that I think should be sort of courted across more of the kind of those kind of sectors to try and bring a much more firm bit of clarity into it, because ultimately it's client data, and that is the gold of the business kind of thing.
Yeah. I deliberately put IT skills at the bottom here because it's the foundation. It actually underpins everything else. And the reality is, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any firm's internal IT team here, but even the really large, firms that have got IT departments of 50 or 100 people, they are struggling to, maintain the necessary skill base to make IT best practice. And in most law firms where you've just got a handful of people, it's becoming an increasingly impossible task. You sort of need a data expert, you need a security expert, you need a networking expert, an operating system server performance expert, application experts, etc. And how does a law firm go about doing that? I mean, the first thing is, even if they get somebody of the right skills, those skills tend to, because they're working now in a silo within a law firm and not in a sort of an active IT, development environment, those skills tend to stagnate a bit. What happens when someone leaves? You've got recruitment problems trying to find the right skills to replace them. And, firms, can they really afford to have, two network or two security experts? What happens with them when they've got the one person and that person leaves or isn't available? It's just becoming an increasingly unmanageable task for internal IT departments to deliver best practice. And the bottom line is, why should any law firm have anything less than best practice IT? I mean, it should be a given. So yeah, it's certainly, many managing partners have spoke to me about this, about the fact that they are concerned that they're sort of, as you said earlier, Neil, sort of a bit of a cottage industry approach to IT, and it's a concern. Okay, let's just look at this from a slightly different angle and consider, how a managing partner manages the cost of IT. This slide is not correct actually, but it'll do. The point is, IT spending is looking like the Manhattan skyline. I don't know how we've got actuals for the future here when we haven't actually got there. So, but the point is, what we're trying to say here is that our budgeted spending tends to overrun. Reality is actuals tend to be more than we've budgeted for, and the ups and downs of it are very difficult to manage. IT costs are just not smooth. So this is something which causes managing partners a concern. And when firms, certainly in my experience, when firms look at outsourced IT seriously, there's usually a trigger point. And that trigger point might be that the existing sort of infrastructure has become outdated. There's a requirement for a large capital expense to upgrade, replace, or whatever. It might be that there is, because of some things we've said, there's a build-up of frustration internally about IT or the IT team, or I have seen it where there's been a security breach and the partnership has said that's enough. Now we need best practice here. So, but there's generally a trigger point which says we need to do something about this. And one of the benefits, and we'll look at those and say, sorry, just to say that one of the benefits of outsourcing is that expenditure can be flattened, so become that predictability that I spoke of earlier, and be flattened in line with a bit like a sort of a utility. So electricity bill or gas bill or whatever, it grows and shrinks with your usage. So if the firm grows, you can predict that your IT costs will grow, but if the firm stays the same size, it flatlines. And similarly, it decreases if the firm shrinks. So Neil, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just those scenarios there, they're very complex. They tie back into skills and security and access, and it's common to find really good skills in organisation specific products, but the very real risk is that they become pigeonholed, and so they're like cottage industry kind of forms up, and the lack of real exposure, real world costs, well, what works, what doesn't work, and try and take the firm forward. And as you say, from a cost perspective, you get this sort of like you said, the sort of skylining sawtooth kind of effects where where it's like, well, now we need to get this skill in, and I need to do this skill, and it's all very sort of unpredictable, and it's all over the place because ultimately you kind of look at it and go, well, actually we don't have sufficient critical mass within the actual organisation to allow that to allow it to work correctly. Because critical mass, as you say, you've got a security guy. Got a really good security guy. He's brilliant. Yeah, but he's just gone on maternity, and then he's just come back, and he fell over and tripped his leg whilst out walking, and now he's off for another 2 months. You're like, well, what are you gonna do? What does that mean then? The guy's gone then for 3 months, 4 months. Well, what does that mean to you as an organisation, kind of thing? So you're just going to be blind for that period of time. So it's a real driver we're seeing is that the sort of as you say, the vast depth of requirements in IT these days. It does, as you say, you need skills from all these different areas. So there are different disciplines. Just like you'd have a different disciplines, of specialism, different types of law. Well, same thing with this in IT. And sort of masterful, sort of jack of all trades, master of none is very very apt kind of thing, because generalists, well, they're not the same as specialists, and that is the crux of the difference kind of thing. Sorry.
Yeah. I said at the beginning that we're sort of looking at IT, outsourced IT as it could be in-house, it could be fully in the cloud, it could be a hybrid. When we engage with a client here at Nasstar, very often they have in-house IT, and the real flatlining, the real predictability of costs comes when a firm is fully migrated to the cloud. That's when you get the smoothest skyline and the most predictable costs. And of course, we always work with clients towards that goal, but there's no one size fits all. If there's been significant expenditure on internal stuff, we often, as I say, take over from the existing internal team to manage the status quo, and to build a plan with our clients as to how we migrate across to that sort of nirvana where everything is in our data center, everything is fully hosted by us, everything is fully managed by us, and it's when that happens that you get the the full benefit of the cost aspects of outsourced IT. Again, puts the managing partner back in control. How nice is it to sort of look at your IT budget and say, I know what we're going to spend for this year and next year, and I know what it's going to cost me if I hire somebody, because I'm just going to add, their IT costs to their salary costs, their premises costs, their everything else, all the other aspects of the expense of a staff member. It's very, very predictable. So let's just look at what that actually comes to when you reach that nirvana. What does IT costs look like? Well, there'll be a contracted fee to Nasstar. I mean, we're Nasstar, but this applies to equally to other outsource. We're not unique in this market, but infrastructure. So the fee to us covers all the necessary servers and network associated operating system, etc., etc. So all of the protection software, both for individual users and at infrastructure level, single point of failures, resilience, backup, absolutely all included, along with core Microsoft applications, so Word, Teams, and all the rest of it. So that's the bottom. That's the set element of the fee to Nasstar, and it covers pretty much everything apart from your software licenses. So you'll have any firm will have PMS and case systems, etc., which are unique to them, and they'll have an arrangement with the provider for a number of software licenses. You add that to your IT budget. You have some subscriptions that you might be HR systems that you're accessing, or might be legal support applications that you're accessing online and paying subscriptions for. We don't displace those. They're to be added to your fees to us. Your internet breakouts, whatever you pay for all of that. Your buying of end user devices and printers and all that sort of stuff, and any special projects. So if you decide to run a project to replace your PMS, that's obviously has costs associated with it, but you can see from a managing partner's point of view that there's a contracted fee to Nasstar which is completely under an SLA, clearly defined in a contract. It's not going to vary, other than, as I say, as you shrink or grow as a firm, and then you add these add-ons which are your choice to the budget, and you can create a very clear understanding of what you're going to spend.
Yeah, and so to add to that, I mean, like we did a lot of M&A firms as well, and they sort of often ask, how much is IT going to spend? We often buy the service sort of partnership and come to integrate it, but if your costs aren't dimensionally understood and you're not very clear on it, then you end up with that, going back to the partners again, it's a lot more money, guys. And it's a really important process to dimensionally understand what is it you're spending money on, because if you're not clear about what is it being spent on, unless either people capital or licenses, subscriptions, and people capital is very important in terms of you've got lots of I say weird systems, but lots of disparate systems, because you come to integrate another firm and you go, they'll just plonk in here. You're like, well, will they? Because you don't understand the cost of it. So actually sometimes all gets very high up. So it's a really important point in terms of and how we break it down, as Colin said. So it's a really critical thing to understand that dimensionally, so that if a firm expands or contracts, you can go, well, this is the contraction, this is the reduction, and a lot of firms we had obviously during COVID, with this contraction, it's great. Well, this is what we cut off, right? It's very simple. There's the reduction. Yeah. And when they come back on stream again, then great. You got colleagues returning back to the firm's offices, and great. Well, kind of goes back up again. So it's a good thing. I'd say it needs to become like a utility service. It shouldn't be a black box.
Sure. And it's a fact that when I sit with managing partners and look back retrospectively after they've outsourced, and they look at all the good what's come from it. I mean, there might systems might be more resilient, more secure, perform better, and all that. But all that gets lost. It's always the one thing that they always sort of focus on is it's about cost. We like the fact that the costs are completely understandable, and as I have laboured the point, but they feel back in control as a result of that. Anyway, let's you mentioned the pandemic, which sort of takes us to the next slide, Neil. And we can't run a session on outsource IT without talking about the effects of the pandemic, in an outsourced world, really. And I mean, if you look back at things, remote access, I mean, COVID literally killed any internal debate over whether working from home was acceptable in firms, whether people could be trusted to put in a shift from working from home. It just overnight became the norm. And, it meant that, systems had to be accessible remotely and perform correctly. And, I guess, every firm went into that in their own way, dealing with it in the best way they could in terms of what devices were accessing, the systems remotely, etc., etc. But 100% it killed any internal debates in firms about working remotely, as it did with going paperless. I'm sure most firms had the paperless office or paperlight office on their agenda. But there was absolutely I'm equally sure that there would have been tension between the private client with many matters on the go compared to the corporate client who might have just a couple, about whether even the most advanced document management system could ever compete with a well-structured manual file with tabs, where they could go through it nicely chronological and search it and all that sort of stuff. The case of, I guess, new working practices have just been, accepted, and I guess it's a case of, having to, as far as that's concerned. But it's definitely had an effect on how firms have approached their their use of paper.
I'd say like big paperless and remote access. I mean, we've doing it, it's a real change of processes and a real sort of everyone's great, got to do it now, and it was done, and people were working, and you kind of sort of a lot of firms sort of always pat ourselves on the backs and go, well, it didn't, it happened, and we survived it, and everyone's working. But what we're certainly seeing there is that whilst a lot of firms are absolutely working very successfully remotely, behind the scenes, what compromises were made to make it work, and in the rush to get things working, were there any corners cut on client data? And it's we had a lot of follow-up work recently with clients going, oh yeah, we started using Teams, and like, was that client data going there? Oh yeah, that shouldn't be there. It comes back to what you're saying about versions of the truth kind of thing. And whilst yes, you've got remote access, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we're working. You're like, well, yeah, but to make that work, something has had to have happened. Something's had to have given, and it was all rushed. And there's certainly for a lot of firms a big cleanup exercise that you kind of need to go back to the very beginning, kind of go, well, how do we work again? Is this actually how are we ensuring client matters are secure and are tested and are valid? And because corners were maybe filled in that questionnaire to say, yeah, we've got all this. Well, that was valid. When's that valid? Because it's valid now. So it's real interesting with going around.
It is, and it's had other effects as well. Administrative support. Maybe most firms are a bit leaner now. People have been more self-sufficient. How we interact with clients is very different. The face-to-face meetings have reduced and been replaced, as you mentioned, with Teams and all that sort of stuff. We're very used to that, and I doubt we'll ever go back to pre-COVID in that respect. I think we'll carry on behaving that way, premises and staffing, again, it must have had an effect. It's not something really that we need to discuss here, but I'm sure that even when we reach any form of normality, there's going to be a much more acceptance towards working from home on a regular basis. And what comes next? I mean, who can be sure? But one thing's for sure: you've got to be in a situation where IT is supporting whatever comes next. It's got to be, COVID ready, change ready, whatever the next thing is ready. And certainly moving towards an outsourced world with a trusted partner does put you in the best footing to be able to adjust to that change. But we'll carry on and just talk a little bit more about, I mean, you've mentioned some of these, or hinted at some of these things, Neil, in just a moment ago. But in terms of concerns arising from the pandemic, well, in terms of strategy, we didn't really approach the COVID world with too much strategic thinking. Most firms just did what they had to do, and there's likely to be a mopping up exercise needed to correct any fallout, and we're certainly seeing that with our client base, where we're having to go back. I mean, we'll talk a bit more about client engagement and what that means in a moment, but absolutely we're having to go back and look retrospectively at some of the things that have happened during COVID, and how to probably put things right. Data, as well as you've just you just hinted at that. But I mean, if the ICO came into a firm now, I know some managing partners are starting to worry that, I was speaking to one the other day. He was sitting in his home, he had a sea of paper around him, all with client stuff all over it. He knows his kids have picked up what's off the floor, what the rubbish, and gone off and done their drawing, probably gone into their school for their school projects. They're not, people are not even thinking accessing firm systems on multiple devices, and not necessarily perhaps even using personal email accounts to move data around, firm data around. There's firms have done what they've needed to do, but again, there's probably a mopping up exercise, and which again leads into security, because the fact of the matter is the network has just grown exponentially as a result of COVID. The endpoints are now all over the place, and we often don't know what those endpoints are, but we still need to make sure we've got the right levels of security, both physical and logical security, to ensure that everything's being protected. We're being asked now to look at home broadband, because from a performance perspective the systems are getting bad press, but actually it's probably the 18 gaming or streaming devices that are in the premises using the same bandwidth when someone's trying to do their work. But this too has become an issue or a concern that's come from the pandemic. And I know on the last point there, health and safety, again, managing partners, I've had a couple talk to me about the fact that they're very worried about people, perching their device on whatever's available, sitting on an orange box at home, and spending 8 hours at work. Is there going to be claims coming down the line for health and safety, in the sense that people are just having to do what they've got to do. I mean, outsourced IT can't solve all of these things. It's not a magic wand, but it highlights the case for best practice IT, which is, what we try and do with our clients is to give them that sort of platform, so that all of these concerns and issues which arise can be attacked, from that basis of best practice. We're getting very close to the end of our allotted time, so I'll rush on, and let's just get into. In fact, questions are going to be difficult because we really are at the limit of our 45 minutes. But in terms of the benefits of outsourced IT, and I'll run through these pretty quickly. When a client comes to us, there is an intrinsic value in joining us. We shine a light on everything that's in their world, and it's an IT audit. We don't, it's a discovery process. We don't touch things until we understand them. So that means that if there's where IT has grown organically over the years in firms, and people just accept the way things are, we're able to shine that light on there and sort of question it and make sure that we during that onboarding process we put things right. It's I had one last year. It was a barrister's chamber actually, and they were spending £11,000 a month on backup that was essentially useless. They couldn't actually do anything with that backup, but people have been backing it up, and the storage had got bigger and bigger and bigger. They were paying for that storage, and when you actually analysed it, it was useless. So there's a huge saving there just by shining a light on what are you doing with your backups. We've mentioned, I mean, I'm not going to labour that point again, but benefits of one of the key benefits of outsourced IT is we do take you down that path to get you to a point where costs are completely predictable. Pandemic proof, absolutely. As we've spoken about, it's about giving you a platform that will leave you in the best possible position to be able to deal with change as it comes. Manage change or unpredictable change. We have to be ready to embrace it. the fact that every practice should be able to receive the benefits of best practice IT. There shouldn't be anything less. And if you come to a provider like Nasstar, that's exactly what we're all about, making sure that you've got the very best IT. And reduced. This is a bit of a reduced dependency on internal IT staff. Don't shoot me for being the messenger here, but a number of times managing partners have spoken to me after they've moved across to outsourced IT to say that they were pretty sure that their IT team were snooping emails and things like that. The grapevine, somehow what the bonus was always known before it was ever announced, and it would always get, if there was an issue in the partnership, somehow it would get out and people knew about it, and they couldn't quite understand it. Of course, when you move to a provider like Nasstar, we've got no interest in what the bonus is, or who's being paid more than X, or X is being paid more than Y, or who X was seen in the wine bar with last night, etc., etc. So that grapevine just dries up, and again, a number of managing partners have spoken to me about the fact that they feel they've had that they've just got a more secure environment as a result. And as I've said, it's all about putting the managing partner back in control, and that is the bottom line of everything here. I'm not saying that outsourced IT is right in all situations, but I think every managing partner has a duty to at least explore the alternative business plan based on outsourced IT, which here at Nasstar we're able to do in a very discreet way without upsetting or involving the existing IT team. It can be done as a clandestine exercise, and it gives the managing partner the option, basically. Look, we're right on the cusp here, so I'm going to say thanks for listening, obviously. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any questions, please let me have them. If we don't manage to complete those during this presentation, we will pick them up afterwards. So yeah, over to you guys. Any questions?